Hello, David. I want to thank you, David, for taking the time to talk to us today. I'm recording this video. We'll put it on the UnRetire website so that everybody has access to your insight and your thoughts about not only work, but the concept of retirement. And we'll focus on your book, which is actually not so new. I think it was launched last February when I met you. And the book is called Full-Time Work and the Meaning of Life. And I'm so grateful for you being here today.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
Before we get into the book, just maybe a bit of background for those of you who are going to be watching this that might not know you or the book, which probably aren't too many people, but David is the managing partner, founder, and chief investment officer of the Bahnsen Group, where he oversees the management of over $6 billion in client assets. He's contributor to a fabulous publication of which I'm a huge fan, National Review, and a frequent guest on CNBC, Fox Business, Fox News, and he's been named a top advisor by Forbes, Barron, and the Financial Times. So pretty impressive resume, I have to say. So with that, onto your book, Full-Time Work and the Meaning of Life. Like I said, I was completely absorbed by your message because it is honestly very rare that people have the view of not necessarily even just work, but of retirement that you have in your book. And, especially the chapter 7 is called The Retirement Disaster, which I probably agree with. So if you could give me a sense for why you wrote the book, what motivated you, what is the biggest message that you want folks to take away from the book?
I think that there is a particular issue at play here, which has to do with my passion for the subject of work, which, as I talk about in the introduction of the book, is somewhat biographical, that in my own life and journey, there has been such a existential significance in work that I want to share this with others. And as I have progressed throughout my adult life, I have been increasingly aware of the fact that there is a big movement at play to distribute a negative message about work. This is not just a matter of me having something to say and I have to take the time to say it, but I have something to say and I have to take the time to say it in a moment in time where a lot of people are saying the opposite. So I have felt this way for the better part of 25 or 30 years since my dad first passed away when I was 20. But where it went into overdrive was at the COVID moment. And so I wrote the book in the couple of years after the COVID experience, where our society, this becomes more of the specific catalyst. So the general catalyst was years and years of me feeling strongly about the meaning and significance and dignity of work, realizing that sometimes people in the faith community and even an increasing amount in just the broader society were not on board. That impetus had already been there, but the timing of it was this COVID moment where we came up with a term, one of the, I believe to this day, I hate even saying it, it bothers me so much, non-essential workers. Yeah. And out of that experience, the really bad hangover effect of how many accelerated retirements there were, the work from home movement, quiet quitting, just a whole lot of other, I think, social maladies that came about as a result of the COVID years, whereby we decided to double down on a low view of work.
Yeah, it's interesting because the doubling down on that low view has a ripple effect. You think about the people who are working, and when I was a kid working, people used to have calendars, like desk calendars, a number of days till you retire, and they'd be ripping them off. And now I'm sure you can do it to the nanosecond on your phone. I haven't, but I'm sure you can. How depressing is that? Right. But people are doing that and looking at work as a means of not working. Yeah. And that negative view of work has such an impact on younger generations. Can you talk a little bit about what you've seen there as you're going through your book on how, especially how baby boomers are really geared up to not work, and it's sending a message to their kids and their kids' kids.
Well, and this is probably one of the most significant generational theory issues that I have spoken about over the last year since the book came out, is that there is this perception that has a certain degree of accuracy to it, that Gen Y, the so-called millennials, and then Gen Z, the younger generation that are basically in their teens and 20s, that there's this real negative view of work that these two generations have, the younger people. And yet the baby boomers had this very high view of work. They worked really hard, had a big work ethic. And what I really believe is indisputably clear is that while the baby boomers were a very hardworking generation and produced an extraordinary amount of goods and services and didn't enter the workforce with a lot of the entitlement issues or excuse making or other things that, you know, we talk about with the everyone gets a trophy generation. But what they did do was enter the workforce for the first time in human history with their eyes on retirement. And I believe in their working careers actually had the biggest impact on younger generations in messaging the idea that work is something you do to not have to do it anymore.
Right.
Anything than this discussion of retirement. How can you say to your kids day by day, I'm working so that at 58 I can stop, or at 62 I can stop, or whatever the year is and the number is and the date circled on the calendar and all those things, and expect those people when they become 20, 25, 30 to go into work with this positive, dynamic, optimistic, aspirational view. If you teach people that work is a mere means to an end, and that the be-all and end-all of life is to be removed from productive activity, you should not be surprised when some people take you seriously about it.
Right. And you know, the removal from productive activity is really astounding. When you look at in your chapter 7, you have a graph in there that I absolutely love. On the x-axis, it's just the years, and on the y-axis, it's life expectancy.
Yeah.
And if you look at the people that retired in 1960, they were 60 years old generally, and they generally lived another 10 years. But those people were those who were farmers. They were working in manufacturing. They were industrial workers. They were transportation. They were not knowledge-based workers like we are today. Yeah. And so when they retired at 60 and lived a few more years, they kind of needed it because they were tired. It's, you know, I don't begrudge them that whatsoever. But I think today you've got those folks that are retiring maybe at 55, maybe at 60 if they're lucky, but they've got this endless vacation ahead of them. So not only are they sending I think, a bad message, like you said, to the younger generation, but they're removing themselves from productivity for the next 20 years. So can you talk a little bit about your concerns about the economy and the pressures economically that has?
Well, and that's one of the things that I try to do in that chapter 7 is make very clear that I believe this retirement disaster, as I call it, is one with many victims. Yeah. And I would be happy to focus only on the retiree as the victim, but that's not really where I think it ends. I think there's a number of aspects we need to consider when we think about the overall social, relational, and economic impact in society. First of all, the issue about people with working with their hands and working with their back versus working with their minds, I think it's important we realize how many people are adding in a criteria that is somewhat disingenuous. The issue that is primarily to account for the big change was mortality and prosperity. Okay, whether or not someone worked with their mind or their hands, if they did not have the ability to exit the workforce, they didn't exit the workforce. Right. And now, where there are people living long enough and having the material means to do so, whether they work with their hands or their minds, they are leaving the workforce on the basis of, I don't have to work anymore. And the fact that this is true as a matter of just cultural expectation is indisputable. They run marketing campaigns on what's your number, what's the number at which you don't have to work for. Anybody who works in financial services, as I do, knows that the basic mathematical solve in retirement planning is figuring out when you can tell somebody you don't need a paycheck anymore. It is totally agnostic as to whether or not, oh, because we're trying to give you relief from your back pain. Now, I'm with you that I have a lot more empathy, and I also have a lot more recognition of age and stage reality.
Right, right.
Where there is physicality involved and limitations in that regard and things of that nature. But no, I don't believe we're talking about anything other than people believing that if they have enough money to not have to work, then why in the world would they work? That's the mentality that creeped in.
Okay, so
And it only creeped in the last several decades.
right, right. Okay, so what do I say to my friends who will watch this video, and you know who you are, that will retire or have retired and say, you know what, it's fine because I get you, I get you. I'm volunteering, I'm working on boards, and board work isn't all that easy to come by. But what do you say to those people? Because I would say most people think that.
Well, I think that it's interesting because I'm sitting here in my office in New York City on 6th Avenue, and I don't think most people in New York City think about it. I think that it's one of the things I love about a place like New York, and I talk about this in the conclusion of the book, that it's one of the only places where you can close a deal in your 30s on a Monday, and on Thursday, people want to know what you're doing next.
Exactly.
There's a significant amount of people that have been financially independent for decades that are still putting a suit and tie on every day. And that isn't going to be the same in every pocket of the country. I know for myself, I don't take for granted that everyone has to think and feel the way I do. But, I've been in a financial position to not need to work for a very long time. And I work harder now than I think I ever have. I just turned 50 last year. But it really is 100% related to my belief that this is what my life is for. Now, to the extent someone says, I was in what do they call it? The rat race, the hustle and bustle.
Right.
People wanting less stress in their life does not bother me. I don't really mind the stress. I like the game. I like playing. That's just me.
Right.
And a lot of the folks in my community and ecosystem are similar to the way I am. That's fine. But others that just say, okay, look, I've achieved a certain financial freedom. I'm at a certain age of life. I'd like to have more margin. I don't believe that that is mutually exclusive. In other words, I think people can stay engaged in productive activity and still have more margin. Now, certain jobs and careers are different. Some industries allow you to turn a knob up and down a little bit more than others. I get that. But your question was very specific about, and as you know, I addressed this in the chapter, when someone says, okay, I did retire. I did something for 30 years that I did well enough that people paid me to do it. And they paid me enough that enabled me to achieve financial freedom. And now I'm going to go do something totally different. And I don't ever understand when someone says, I was a successful lawyer for 35 years, and now I'm going to go build orphanages in Mexico, why they think they're any good at building orphanages in Mexico, when I would imagine what the world needs from them is more lawyering.
Right.
Now, again, boards, nonprofit, volunteer, there's all sorts of things, but I don't think it's honest that most people have defined their retirement years as the replacement of paid career activity with unpaid volunteer activity. Most people have replaced it with recreation.
Right.
And non-productive activity. They're entitled to time with their grandkids. They're entitled to cruises and vacations and golf. That's all fine. But to make your life center around what you call it, a 20 or 25-year vacation,
Right.
I think it not only strips that senior person of their own dignity and usefulness, but it is hurting the economy because we are lacking mentorship, seniority, wisdom, experience, expertise. All of those nouns I just used are somewhat different from one another, but all of them are vital.
Yeah,
Vital for
exactly.
institutions, vital for organizations, vital for economic activity, and it is having a huge impact that we are being deprived of some of that senior talent.
Right. It's so interesting. So what my new company is doing is taking or helping facilitate the connection between the retirees and the companies. I have gotten so much interest from the retiree side. I really do think people are clamoring to be able to stay engaged on some level. Doesn't have to be 40 hours a week, doesn't even have to be 20 hours a week, but just to have that structure. And like you said, the dignity of producing it's vital to our happiness. So I don't see an issue so far on the retiree side. We haven't yet opened up the company portal. And this is a buyer and seller relationship. We've got a whole lot of sellers, and I'm quite certain we're going to have a whole lot of buyers. But what's in it really for companies? You just mentioned the wisdom and the expertise that they've developed over those years. I am not a fan of compelling companies to hire anybody other than the best person suited for a particular role. So I have zero interest in compelling companies to hire retirees for anything.
Mm-hmm.
But what is it that is companies are going to have to find compelling over the next decade as we have so many boomers leaving the workforce and wanting to get back in on their own terms?
Well, a lot of it is just this issue of problem solving that all companies are in need of people who are versed in developing, finding, and implementing solutions. And there will be a shortage of problem solvers if the whole workforce is filled with people between the ages of 20 and 35, and you have nobody between the ages of 50 and 70. Okay, there is an instinct for problem solving that gets developed like a muscle over the years. There is a patience, there is a tact, there is a diplomacy, there is a resilience. These are character attributes that get developed over time. And in addition, there's subject matter expertise. There's institutional DNA. There's someone who's been at a company 40 years that not only knows where the coffee is down the hall, but they know where all the people are up and down the hall who have been there over the years and what the company's gone through and how they handled this last downturn and what they dealt with the last time a new competitor came in and so forth. So there's just a lot of attributes that we don't think about. But I also want to bring up some invisible effects. When we are forcing our older people out or celebrating our senior people that are running it to the sidelines, we are assuring ourselves of less productivity from our younger people. Because the younger people, even beyond what we've already talked about, that there's a certain lack of some of the experience and expertise, the younger people then are also working in their careers now with a mindset of trying to get to a finish line that is all about exiting instead of building, growing, cultivating, producing, succeeding, achieving. You replace a positive with a negative. You say everyone needs to come to work. Okay, well, that's good. But going to work to produce and build, saying going to work to just survive and exit.
Yeah, exactly.
Those create two different outcomes.
Exactly. And right. And culture matters so much, so much. So boy, I'm going to do a sales pitch for UnRetire. I know we're supposed to be talking about your book, but that's exactly what UnRetire is hopefully going to start to change. And I had somebody comment today that we've changed the way he's thinking about his retirement. And, so I think little by little, if we can start to do that, if we can get people to read your book and start to take a different view of the next chapter in their lives, I think they're better off. I think society economically is better off, and I think just corporations and cultures in corporations are better off.
Well, I agree, and I think that the way you're describing it's very important. It is a micro and macro benefit. It matters to the individual. It matters to the company. It matters to the people that individual mentors, and it matters to the broad economy in which goods and services are produced and exchanged.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think that the next generation's attitude towards work has a chance to be substantially different than what we've dealt with here over the last 10 to 20 years, if we can get back to seeing work as something that is soul-filling, joy creating. That it does not mean they're not challenges. It does not mean they're not coworkers we don't like, or bosses that we don't get along with. There are obstacles to overcome, but that in all of those things, we are living life. We are experiencing life as it's supposed to be experienced, and developing the character and the muscle memory and the instincts that really make us much more capable people, and ultimately more fulfilled. Then all of a sudden what you've done is you generate a group of 20 to 25-year-olds that are going to enter the workforce with excitement for the opportunity, not begrudging the have to of work.
Yep.
This has got to move from a have to a get to mentality.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, there's the title for your next book, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. I think we are up on time. David, thank you so much for taking the time today to talk to me. It's a topic that is so near and dear to me. And I hope the folks that read your book, we'll put a link to it on our website, see work and see the meaning that it should be having in life in a similar way. I think that you and I do.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you for all the great work for this cause you're doing as well.
Beautiful. All right. Thanks, David. Bye-bye.